From the Mapleview Animal Hospital studios, this is the WHTC Morning News with Gary Stevens and Peg McNichol on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
Welcome back to the WHTC Morning News for this Tuesday, October the 6th. Tuesday mornings, we have a chance to chat with what's going on in Washington with one of the two men who represent the Lake Shore. On Capitol Hill, he is Republican Fred Upton of St. Joseph. His district includes Allegan County, most of Allegan County. He's on the other end of our Zoom connection. Fred, good morning. Hope all is well.
Good morning. It's a beautiful, beautiful look to the morning, isn't it?
It is very nice. The thing is, though, you're speaking from the Zoom connection from your home in St. Joseph instead of in Washington. To a certain extent, maybe you'd like to be in D.C. right now to be able to start working on this, the latest COVID-19 stimulus package right now. It's on hold because there's still a lot of people not happy with what's in the package, and with the president coming down with the illness, that sort of gummed up the works too.
Well, it did, and but we're still working on it. In fact, the Problem Solvers Caucus, as you know, I'm one of the vice chairs. We had a Zoom call yesterday. We're making progress, and actually, Speaker Pelosi gave a statement yesterday, probably at a press conference or some type of interview, indicating that the door wasn't shut. It's certainly not locked. It was our group, of course, after the Senate failed to pass a package more than a week ago. A couple weeks ago now, we came together, made a proposal to get our leaders, inspire our leaders to get back to the table. That's happened. And even though the bill that the speaker brought up last Thursday night was very partisan, barely had the votes to pass. In fact, if had all the Republicans been there, without a single Republican voting for it, it would have gone down. But on Friday morning, it's my understanding that some of the airlines contacted both leaderships and said, "What the heck are you doing? Do you not know that if we go beyond October 1st, of course we are, without some assistance, they're going to be laying off," and they announced this, tens of thousands of airline workers. And for these airlines, frankly, I think some of them would have gone belly up permanently, would never have been able to come back. So an assurance was made. The speaker came out with an announcement then early Friday afternoon saying that she was prepared to move a standalone bill just on that. And of course, as that those discussions continued through the weekend, we're back in it. And I'm hopeful. It's one step less than encouraged, but let's talk next week. I'm hopeful that maybe by the end of the week, we may be able to see a framework very much along the lines of what we announced. More money for stimulus checks, more money for unemployment, but not to exceed what people's working wages were. More PPP for small businesses that, let's face it, this went way beyond Easter. And certainly our hotel, our entertainment, our restaurant industry remains very much troubled. More money for our schools. I talked to a good number of my superintendents yesterday. We'll do so again today. They've had to take additional steps, not only at the K-RESA or the RESA level, but obviously the individual schools. And there's a report this morning that Peg, I'm sure, knows about regarding a number of different positive cases at schools throughout the state. So they're adding additional resources. But the bottom line is talks are still going on. I'm hopeful that if we get some type of agreement, we will come back before the election, because you know what? We can't wait. You're putting the whole economy at risk. You can't wait just because of the election to try and do something. So let's get it done. Let's make it bipartisan. And if we go back either next week or the following week to cast a vote, if it's the right package, I'm convinced it will pass by a wide margin. The president will sign it. They've been at the table. This is not an end run around him. And I saw a poll just yesterday that I want to say 75% of the American people believe that we should be doing this ahead of the Supreme Court or the Senate moving on a Supreme Court nomination. So let's get the work done. I'm ready to do it, and we are making progress, even though I'm here in St. Joe.
Speaking of Peg in the newsroom, she does have a question for you.
I actually have a two-parter. One is, when you do that legislation, are you going to make sure that anybody with a COVID-related after effect doesn't get bumped from their coverage because it's a pre-existing condition. And
Yep.
and the other thing, so that was a quick answer. The other thing is, while you're in St. Joe, what influence are you exerting on state lawmakers to get back at the table? Because the governor's now asking for action so that 800,000 plus people don't lose benefits because of their unemployment situation.
Yeah. So a couple of things. So I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm out and about like I normally am. I'm very limited in terms of appearances, group sizes, etc. I'm on the phone. Obviously, the unemployment provision is a key one, and will be part of a second of the next COVID package. I'm convinced that it will. As it relates to I think you're referring to obviously the state Supreme Court decision last week. And I talked to some of our state legislators yesterday. I mean, this ought to be, let's face it, the perfect opportunity where you can have our state legislators, both sides of the aisle, meet with the governor's office and actually put together something that's bipartisan that they're all comfortable with. This is a really tough time for so many folks. We shouldn't have this partisanship. We ought to work together. I'm not a lawyer. I've not read the Supreme Court decision, but it would have seemed that even though, as I understand it, the Supreme Court ruled that she had the right to declare an emergency, she didn't have the right to extend it without the legislature's approval. Let's get them back in a room, get the pizza and beer, whatever else it takes, and see if we can't get an agreement that makes sense, that everyone's comfortable with, that the bottom line protects our workers, protects our families, obviously protects our communities.
We're talking with Congressman Fred Upton on the WHTC Morning News. Since the president has contracted the disease, like everything else he does, it comes under some scrutiny about what he does, what he is not doing. Is he sending the right messages of what his actions are, or are some of the things he's been doing maybe sending the wrong message? And the critics have a right to be critical of what he's doing.
Well, he's always going to be under the magnifying glass, that's for sure. I'm sure in hindsight, many of the folks that were there at the Rose Garden ceremony, I'm presuming that that's where a good number of senators, other folks, President of Notre Dame, probably contacted COVID. I'm sure that they all wish now that they had worn a mask. This is personal responsibility. There's not a time that I'm outside of my house, particularly going to some store, whether it be the grocery store or the post office, that I don't have that mask on. And that's the message that we have to send until we get the testing and the vaccine. And by the way, those will be two important elements in this bipartisan package that we talked about a little bit earlier. We got to make sure that the resources are there. But in the meantime, leaders, and the president's been photographed with a mask. He's been quoted as saying, wear a mask over the last couple of months. But clearly there was a disconnect with a lot of people, and it could well be that was the hot spot that, let's hope, doesn't take any lives and not serious illness with the folks that have tested positive so far.
Let me add one more thing about getting the vaccine. According to our CBS briefing sheet, the White House is blocking the FDA from issuing guidelines on the emergency authorization of a potential coronavirus vaccine, specifically objecting to a provision that would require vaccine trial participants to be followed for 2 months after receiving a final dose. It would make an emergency release authorization of a vaccine especially impossible before Election Day. Let the process work out, or perhaps because of the urgency of the situation, Fred, get this vaccine out as promptly as possible. Who knows?
Well, I think we have to look at the evidence. We have to look at how promising it is. A couple years ago, I supported bipartisan legislation passed, I want to say, without any opposition, called Right to Try. So we need to get that evidence that's out there. We want to see how promising it is. Let's look at the results, make decisions. Obviously, I'm not in favor of a mandate that everyone has to have a vaccine. That's never been part of my cause. But let's look at the evidence, and if it really is successful and we can see that right away, then allow the FDA to make that decision along with the doctors and the patients.
One final thing, Fred Upton, you said you talked to some of the school superintendents and the effort to try to get PFAS out of school drinking water. Obviously, some in your district, most notably Parchment, have had to deal with this particular issue, but it's something that overall generally probably needs to be taken care of.
Well, it does. I'm on a PFAS task force. Again, it's bipartisan. What is it that I do that's not really? I'm on a task force. We're looking for legislative solutions to help communities deal with this. Obviously, it's something that lasts forever. It's one of those forever chemicals. So whether it's asbestos or whether it's PFAS, we need to have the resources to help our communities deal with it, particularly when it gets in the drinking water, as it did in Parchment and a couple other communities around the state. And we're actually working as part of the defense authorization bill to make sure that, this is in firefighting foam. So at a lot of our military installations that have airfields, that's where they've done the training. They've used the foam to put out the fires. Guess what? That's contaminated the groundwater. That's a federal responsibility to be cleaned up. And we're hoping that we'll have the right funding measures to help those communities as this bill moves forward.
He is Fred Upton. He is the Congressman from St. Joseph that joins us Tuesday mornings at this time to talk about some of the things going on in Washington. He represents Allegan County in the U.S. House. Fred, as always, we appreciate your time on some of the issues of the day. And if all goes well, we'll talk the day after Columbus Day. I know it's not politically correct to call it that, but we'll talk next Tuesday morning. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Fred Upton on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.